Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars.
SoundCartel.
It might sound simple, but when it comes to boosting cash flow, don't focus on reducing costs. Instead, work out how to increase revenue. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. According to John Cleary of Cost Management Specialists, businesses can locate the pot of gold to extra revenue by finding the existing drivers to that particular pot. To get there, the first step is to remove the silos, so common in so many businesses, and encourage cross-functional teams. John Cleary explains what he means to Chris Ashmore.
Cross-functional capability recognises the functional skills and the particular skill sets in a business, but it says we don't want silos where people look at things through one closed set of eyes. We want to share views across a range of skill sets, different ways of looking at things, but very much through the eyes of a customer, so that all of our decisions are around not because that's good for engineering or not because that's good for accounting, but it's good for a client.
Well, can you give us an example of how cross-functional capability boosts revenue?
Okay. I'll give you two examples. I've been doing some work in higher education, and they're under a bit of pressure because the Commonwealth has threatened to reduce their grant funding by 20%. They believe or have believed that they're under pressure in terms of facilities, and the physical size of lecture theatres is a constraint. What's been identified now is that through electronic imaging, they've been able to indicate or prove that 50% of the buildings, that the spaces that have been booked actually haven't been used. So where in the past, if there's been a booking, the assumption was there was no capacity, now they're able to say that we actually have got that capacity. The problem is that people book and forget or don't cancel. And if we've got that capacity and it's been a constraint to generating revenue, how do we look at the real capacity that we've got as opposed to that which we imagined because there was some constraint which was they were booked even though they weren't being used?
So you can increase revenue without necessarily increasing costs?
Oh, absolutely. Let me give you an aged care example. There's two public companies that report, and so therefore there's transparency around their vacancies. Now, one of those has got 103 vacancies and another has 97 vacancies. In dollar terms, the one with 103 vacancies is foregoing about $7.9 million a year. Now, their operating costs don't reduce because the bed becomes vacant. They'll still produce the same number of meals, might be marginal difference. They'll still have the same fixed costs in terms of staff. They'll still have the same fixed costs in terms of operating the business. But if they were to start to look at the admission process, then it's possible to look at what are the constraints in that process and how it is that you would fill the spaces that you had and how it is that you would meet the needs of the people on the waiting list to actually get into the facility. Now, in each case, it does two things. One is it will achieve the revenue capacity which is not currently being achieved. And secondly, if you do that, you're reducing your operating cost per resident per day because you're spreading it across more residents. And you're not creating a demand that doesn't exist. You're responding to a waiting list and saying that lag time between a room becoming available and a room being filled again, if we manage it, there's scope to increase revenue, to meet the demands of people on the waiting list, to reduce our operating costs per resident per day, and to use that money to invest in quality of care.
Well, okay, well, what does a revenue growth strategy involve?
It involves 9 aspects. The first is a client-centric culture. I think this is the big shift in business because of digital transformation, and it makes so many things transparent that weren't transparent before. And one of the things that's transparent is clients have a lot more choice now than they've ever had before. And not only will they have that choice, but they'll be marketed to through digital media and through various mechanisms so that the choice is readily apparent to them. The second is business intelligence. It's around saying we've all got a sense of the past, but the future reflects the past now less than it ever has before. Because of digital and the prevalence of information available to people and choice, business intelligence is what helps us make informed choice and get away from that whole notion of gut feel, which may be a long way from where a client is. So the business intelligence will drive us to a whole range of things. One will be to understand our client base. So I'm on to point 3, where client base is made up of 2 things. One is your existing base and what percentage of those you retain. Because if there's a lot more customer choice, the likelihood is of your existing base, you will lose some. Inevitably in the market, people will shift. So the question then becomes about what percentage or what number of your current clients you retain. The second is your prospects. If you've got good business intelligence, then you know what the market wants and you'll be able to identify sectors that you can appeal to through a digital strategy. So then the question becomes, of those prospects, what percentage of those can you convert to new clients? So your client base is a function of your retained clients and your new clients. And once you've got your client base, you can look at transaction value and transaction frequency. Because ultimately, if you can increase the frequency, then you're responding to demand, and that should be growing your top line. If you can increase the value, then simply what you're doing is saying your business model can deliver a lot more things at a lower cost to the same customer, and so the transaction value should go up. You then start to look at your staff utilisation and what opportunities there are there. Part of the opportunity will be that your senior staff aren't working on the business, they're working in the business. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of evidence in business these days where staff will delegate up to a senior staff person who's not smart enough to stand back and say, thanks for sharing the problem with me, tell me when you might have a solution. The fifth aspect is around the service of the product range. Really important we go back and say to people, of the things you're buying from us, are they meeting your needs, and are there other ways in which we might modify what we do? The next is the pricing and discount model. In a dynamic business world, pricing isn't set and forget. We really need to go back and look at what's our position in the local competitive market. In terms of pricing, if we were to target cost, what are the things that we might get out to be able to get it down to a certain level? Same with discounting. Discounting needs to be a strategy. It's really got to be a strategy that grows revenue. The next is the cost management and revenue focus. Take the university example. If, for instance, the Commonwealth was to reduce their revenue by 20%, chances are there would be huge changes in the sector. If, though, they stand back and say, what's the demand for our courses that are well remunerated in terms of government revenue, and how is it we might increase the number of places that are available in that course? And if you go back and look at how many places are there, and you understand why that number was chosen, if it was chosen because that number of students needed that size of lecture theatre, then start to look at the patterns of student attendance over time. Now that a lot of kids don't go to university, they'll access lectures online and so on. And so that constraint, which might have predicted the number, it's possible that by a new way of delivering or by offering options, in particular high-tech, take as much as you want online, but high touch, more smaller tutors and more contact between tutors and students, that you actually increase the number of students in that class. Number 8 is customer profitability. International research shows that better than 80% of customers in a business make no contribution to profit. Now, when I first read that, I was pretty astounded by it. But there's sufficient research from sufficient places to say more often than not, it's the high revenue customers that make no contribution to profit because they demand more and more, which isn't built into the pricing structure. And as a result of that, you're spinning the wheels because the business is serving big customers, but a lot of them make no contribution to profit. So it's important to understand which customers are profitable, which customers aren't, to have a target level of profitable customers, and it will never be 100%. And then it's important to understand that selling more of the same products to a customer that's not profitable just increases their lack of contribution to profit rather than does anything to enhance or advantage the business. So the last of these is change management. I've talked about a lot of things that require agility, not just in thought, but in action. I've talked about things that are responsive to business intelligence about what really represents value to the customer. But ultimately, we need to be able to work and engage staff in developing revenue and getting the insight from staff at all levels of the service delivery chain to how it is that we grow our revenue. But we also need to understand those staff that are locked in the past, that are less interested in client value, more interested in looking at things through old world and aren't responsive to clear data that says we've got to do things differently if we want to retain this client or we want to sell more to this client. So the change management stuff is really significant, and it's a large part of moving with agility to meet customer needs, and you simply can't assume that you've got that capacity.
That was Principal at Cost Management Specialists, John Cleary. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow at BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.